All right. So we'll just give it one more minute there. A few people jumping on here. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. We're excited to have Mark Veenstra host part one of our two-part webinar series. Today's topic is managing mental health with COVID-19 in your personal life. Mark is a man who wears many hats. He's a business owner and a registered psychotherapist and a family man. Mark owns and operates Small Jobs Landscaping. Small Jobs is going into its 10th season, and he has been a member of Landscape Ontario for 7 years. Mark has 17 years experience in the mental health field. Mark and his wife have been married for 17 years, and together they have 4 very active children. Before I welcome Mark, just a few brief housekeeping notes. We do have a chat available on the side for you to ask questions. We will have a few question breaks throughout, and feel free to put your questions in the question box. Once the webinar has concluded, we'll be sending out an email with some tools that Mark has created, along with a playback to this presentation. Thank you, Mark, for joining us, and it's all yours.
You're welcome. All right, well, thank you for giving me this opportunity. It's a great thing that I think that Landscape Ontario has given us this opportunity to talk about mental health. It's been interesting hearing that it's popped up in the other webinars, and that's why I stepped forward and mentioned that I have this interesting dichotomy in my life. I mentioned all my kids. If you want to pull up that first picture. If not, you don't get to see my kids. As with all of us, oh, there we go. As with all of us, I'm working from home right now in sort of a makeshift studio I've made under the stairs. And so I have 4 active kids running around the house with 2 dogs and my wife. And so you may hear some things, but we've tried to keep it down a little bit for us. Just a little bit about my background, how I got into these 2 hats of psychotherapy and Landscape Ontario. It's actually the way I paid for my schooling. I got a master's degree in marriage, family, and child counseling, so I could work with primarily youth and families. And to do that, I did landscaping through the summer. It's a great way to collect the money and pay for my schooling. And then I ended up starting a company, but the company 10 years ago, sort of on the side as an extra income, and it has grown from there. That's why it's called Small Jobs Landscaping. I didn't want to get into anything too big that I wasn't able to manage. So today I'm focusing on the personal level and management during this health crisis of COVID-19. We want to look at the mental health aspect, and later on we're going to be doing part 2, which we're going to look at more of the mental health within the business. So today we're looking at the personal stuff. This presentation really is just a thumbnail of a bunch of things that I've learned over the years. Each topic, each subcategory within this webinar could actually be its own presentation. And so, yeah, it is just a thumbnail, but feel free to ask questions and I'll do what I can to answer them. It is a very unsettling time. There's lots of uncertainty and lots of information we would like to have that we can't get. Information we're getting and being told what to do that we can't control. It is unsettling, and it does take an emotional toll on people. So today I want to walk through some of the concepts and ideas, and I hope that it'll help bring some understanding and give you some strategies on how to manage emotions and bring hope to yourself and bring hope to your family. So I want to take a moment and talk a bit about mindfulness. Mindfulness might be something that you hear from time to time, and it is a bit of a pop thing, and some people think it's a bit hokey. I used to be one of those people that thought it was a bit hokey, so hopefully we can understand the importance of mindfulness, because the importance of mindfulness comes from the philosophy. Now, there's lots of different things. If you Google mindfulness, you'll see lots of different definitions and stuff. So today what we're working with is really just to being present in the moment, without judgment, without distraction, and without overthinking things. So what do I mean by without judgment? Well, we want to look at just noticing things. We don't want to put a negative or a positive spin on it. We don't want to give it a value. So if you're listening to music, you're going to notice the drums. You're going to notice the piano. You're going to notice the flute. We avoid things like saying, I like the drums. That flute sounds a little bit pitchy. Those are all judgments, and those do not allow us to be right present in that moment. Staying focused in the moment will help you with distraction. If we find ourselves being distracted from the moment, you just gently bring yourself back. You don't want to judge yourself on being distracted either. And don't overthink. We're just here to notice. So if you look in the graphic I've put up, you see the person has all these things on their mind. I can't even tell what they all are. There's cars and kids and people and noise. And then you have the dog who's in the moment, just seeing the moment for what it is, the sun, the trees, and that's all. So I'm an experiential kind of guy. I like to be hands-on. So this modality of being online is a little odd for me. I like to ask questions and get feedback and have people do stuff. So I'm going to try something today where we're going to actually try to participate in mindless activity. We're going to take a moment and we're going to do one that people often listen to. They often hear, just breathe, just breathe. And breathing is super important. When we get anxious, we don't breathe as much, and it actually makes it harder to think, harder to process, harder to manage in our life. So we want to just take a moment to breathe. So what we're going to do is take about a minute and we're just going to focus on our breath. I want you to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth at your own rate. And what I want you to notice is that what it feels like. Notice the sensations of the air going through your nose and out your mouth as you breathe out. What sounds do you hear? If you find yourself entering your mind and getting distracted by thoughts and wondering where I'm going to go with this presentation, just gently bring yourself back and just focus on your breath. And again, don't get caught up if you get distracted. Don't get caught up in judgment of, oh, I messed up. I can't stay focused. I'm too overwhelmed. Just gently bring yourself back and focus on your breath. Remember to be present in this moment, focus on your breath, and avoid judgment, which includes judging me for doing this hokey thing. So get comfortable for a moment, and I want to take about 1 minute just for us to focus on our breath. If it helps to free you from distraction, feel free to close your eyes. We're going to start to breathe in 3, 2, 1. Okay, that was just about a minute. So normally I would ask people for feedback, what they thought about this, but I'm not going to do that today. But I do thank you for participating if you chose to participate. There's lots of research actually out there that states taking a moment once or twice a day just to take a moment to breathe and to just focus on your breath or focus on something is actually very calming and stabilizing to your mental health. So we'll come back to the idea of grounding because there's a lot of grounding that we need to do when it comes to managing our emotions, especially when they become really intense. So I want to take a little bit of time now to talk about our emotions. We all have them, and ultimately, we don't know a lot about them. So what causes us to experience strong emotions and things? Well, the simple answer is it all depends. Different people handle emotions in different ways. 2 people can live in the same house, be in the same family, have all similar situations, and express and respond to emotions very differently. Why is this? There are lots of theories that people have and models that people use to try to understand how emotions work and different characteristics around emotions. What I'm going to use today is the basic. Emotional reactions are developed through a combination of our biology, our psychology, and the environment we live in. There are people that are just wired to be more sensitive. So they're more sensitive to emotional issues. There are some that are more resistant or more resilient. There's people that have less emotional response to things. That's a lot of our biology. It's just the way we are. There are psychological factors that play into how we manage emotions. Some things include even just the developmental age. As we age, we develop more psychological strategies to manage emotions, so we're able to handle them better. And then there's the environment. So that's our social construct, the place we live, the way we interact with people. Are we getting what we need to help us manage and shape our emotions? Together, these all build the way we experience emotions. The great thing about emotions is that there is no right and wrong. It can be helpful that they're building us up. Sometimes emotions can hinder us. They can tear us down. The simple thing is there is no right or wrong. We can't say that is the wrong emotion to feel because we just feel. Our society gives us messages about what's okay to feel and what is not okay to feel. The trick is that we still are going to feel those things. We just end up having ways of masking it or making it look more socially appropriate. And as a society, we're lacking in ways of describing our emotions. So it makes it really hard for us to express what's going on when we're very limited. You can look up the research. Typically, we have very few words in our vocabulary to describe emotion, which is really hard to then pinpoint how we're feeling. So to give you an idea, I pulled up a feeling wheel. This is going to be something you can look at. In the middle are the feelings that we normally think of: sadness, happiness, anger. And as it goes out, it just expands on the way we can conceptualize those emotions. And the more ways we have to describe things, the more accurately we can portray how we're feeling and interact with people. I was asked to comment on people that say, well, I don't really feel like it doesn't feel, I feel like I should be upset about this, or I feel like I should be getting angry, or I feel like I should be happier about this. Again, there's no right or wrong to feeling. You feel what you feel. There are things that we're biologically set to be this way. Other people have also said, well, I just am used to stuffing my emotions. I choose not to feel them. I just press them down. And then, again, it's not a right or wrong. We actually have the ability to suppress emotions to manage situations. There are things in our life that come up where we cannot express the emotions that we want to. If you're in a trauma situation and you need to deal with what's going on, if you have a child or even an employee that's been injured on the site, you can't get sad and weep about that. You need to deal with it. So we actually can repress our emotions to manage that. If it becomes our go-to tool to manage emotions, if that's all we do is stuff them away, it can have effects on us, even physically. I'll share with you that a couple years I had a couple stressful springs. This is another one. But I was having trouble with hiring and things like that, and was looking at how I was going to manage my company. And I wasn't acknowledging the amount of stress it was causing me. And I actually started getting physical symptoms to the point I ended up in the hospital they thought I was having potentially a heart attack. It ended up being just stress after all the tests, which was very good. But our stress can mimic so many things when we aren't able to express it. So when we come into the situation we're in right now with COVID-19, it is very confusing. It is very difficult to know even what to feel. So just be free to feel what you feel and be able to express that in ways to people that you trust and that you care, that care for you. So there were two main areas that the panel came back to me at where they wanted to look at. And that had to do with anxiety and grief. So I do want to take a moment. I don't know if there's any questions that have popped up just about how we process emotion, how we manage emotion, how emotion sort of shows up.
No, there's no questions.
No questions? Okay, so I'm just going to jump into the anxiety. So when we look at anxiety, I want to assure everybody that anxiety is actually a normal emotion. There's nothing wrong with anxiety. It actually has a functional purpose in our life. Uh, Anxiety is a mechanism that primes us to deal with a potential or perceived threat. Our biology doesn't differentiate. This is the important thing that we'll get back to later, is our biology doesn't differentiate a potential threat, so something that we can see in the horizon, and something that we just think is a threat. Our body will prime itself the same way, and that's what anxiety is going to start doing. Anxiety activates a mechanism in our body to prepare us to manage the threat if needed. And the things that are needed to remember is that we all experience, cope, and respond to anxiety in different ways, like all emotions. So this is just a little chart just about the different ways that people manage anxiety. And this is when anxiety is sort of taken to the next step, where we start to have some problematic behaviors, problematic thinking, and things like that. There are also different ways people cope. Some people can be very rational, and some people can be very calm because they're planning. These are things that are also beneficial, because that's what anxiety does. Anxiety actually brings physiological changes to us. It increases blood flow to large muscle groups so we can move faster. It actually opens your pupils so it lets more light in so we can see more detail. These are all biological features. That priming, that biological response is what is often known as the fight or flight, and what we call now fight, flight, or freeze mechanism in our body. Our body is prepping to fight whatever's happening, to get away from it, or to just stop, like a deer in headlights. The difficulty is if we get to the point where our biology takes over. So if we hit the threshold that our biology takes over, our brain actually changes how it's functioning. And if I can get me back on the screen, I want to just explain how our brain works a second. So if everybody takes your hand, we all have one, I hope. And if we think of this as our spinal cord, this is what we call our amygdala. It's the emotional center of our brain. So it's on the inside here, and we have the cortex. So the piece up here that does the thinking, it's up here. When we have a lot of emotional buildup and we have a lot of emotional stimuli, the amygdala is activated, and that's what causes all the hormones and things to go. You can actually pull up the next picture. And once that's activated, it actually shuts off our thinking part of our brain. So as you can see here, the body perceives a threat. We get our activation system up. It releases the hormones, and we actually stop thinking. Our body goes into straight reaction mode. And so if we get to this point, we don't make good decisions. So what we're trying to do, and we call that an amygdala hijack. It's just sort of the way we describe it. So the amygdala hijacks your brain and makes it so it's really hard to think about what you want to do. So in these times of a heightened emotional arousal, it's really important that we're not making snap decisions, because they might be reactionary decisions, because our biology is telling us that we just need to fix this problem right away. We want to then come and ground ourselves and get into the moment so we can deactivate that amygdala hijack and get the thinking part of our brain back online so we can make good decisions. So how do we do this? This is sort of the reason why I think most people have come here, is to figure out how do we manage these strong emotions. And so I don't know if you remember, I mentioned before that our emotions are great, but we can't actually access them directly. So if I asked everybody to stick up their hand, you can raise your hand. If I say to stick out your tongue, you can stick out your tongue. If I say to think of a pink elephant, you can think of a pink elephant. If I tell you be happy, it doesn't work. So we can think of that even when we talk to people. We say, oh, don't be so scared. Don't be so anxious. Don't be so mad. It doesn't help, because we can't if it worked, we would just be like, oh, I won't be mad then. Oh, I should just be happy. So how we get to this is the way we think about stuff. So the way we think and behave influences our emotions. So often when I start talking about this, people will just be like, oh, so that's like just put a happy face on. And it's not really like that. We're not talking just putting a dress on a pig and calling it pretty. It's actually about changing the way we think about things and what we focus on. So there's a picture here. We have two guys. They're in the very similar situations, very similar place. And you can see where their focus is. One's focused on the bars and one's focused on the beauty beyond the bars. In stressful times, like what we're under right now with COVID-19, there are so many things on our mind, so many things we don't understand. And it's difficult to focus on the beauty. It's difficult to focus beyond the bars. All we see is the restrictions that we have. And one of the ways that our brain then starts to compensate, especially because we don't have a lot of information, is we try to fill in the information gap. Our brains don't like holes in information. If I was with you right now, there's a little experiment you can do that actually shows that we have a blind spot in our eye, and you can trigger it. You can look up blind spot if you want to Google it, but there's a little experiment. But our brain constantly fills in the hole where our optic nerve comes in the back of our brain, or back of our eye, because there's no light receptors there, because it's the cable coming at the back. But we don't look around our day and see a hole in our vision all the time. Our brains like completion. They like to have information. So when we don't have it, our brains try to fill in the gaps. And so what can happen is we can get something called what we call runaway thinking, where you start jumping from situation to situation and scenario to scenario. And when that happens, it's like a runaway train. There's never a good ending to it. An example would be, so you're thinking about your business and that we're not working right now, and because we're not working, I can't pay the bills, and because I can't pay the bills, I'm not going to be able to get the new equipment, and maybe we won't have groceries for my family, and maybe the CES might come because we can't provide for it, and they're going to take my kids. We can get ourselves spun into a position where there's no evidence for that to be happening, but our brains are trying to make sense of things and where we can go and plan for a solution. So when we don't have the evidence to back it up, it's problematic, and that's where we want to pull ourselves back. That's where we want to go back to grounding, like what we did with the mindfulness, and look at the situation we're in. Look at what is reasonable. Look at what is immediate. So in that scenario I just said, right now we are not working. That is true. Do we have food on the table now? Yes. Can we have food tomorrow? Yes. Do we know if we'll be working next week? We don't know. So that's where evidence ends. We cannot predict past then. Business-wise, we've heard lots of things that you do want to do cash flow analysis and look at how long we can extend these things. That's where you can look at those things, but there's evidence for that stuff. There's programs that the government is now putting out that you can get interest-free loans and things. So we're evaluating those processes, but there's evidence and information to back that. It's not just a runaway thought. We can also get caught up in negative thinking, where the focus is only on the negative, similar to the guy looking at the bars up here. Just give me a moment. And conquering negative thinking is, again, it's not just putting a smile on your face saying, oh, look at this, we're home and not working, everything's wonderful, I'm so happy that I'm spending all this time at home. That's just putting a dress on the pig and calling it pretty. What we want to do is shift the thinking again to more realistic. So people say do a positive mind change or whatever. Sometimes you can't switch all the way to the positive. What's helpful is then to become realistic. So in a negative situation, when we're focusing on all the negatives in it, it's just going to bring on our anxiety. And if we can look at it in a different way, that is still real. So one of the examples I've seen floating around the internet is really good. When you look at the idea that we are stuck at home, that's very hopeless sounding. It's very problematic. It's not hopeful. when that got shifted online, they said, we're safe at home. The situation hasn't changed. We're still at home. We're still asked to stay here as much as we can. The focus is now on our safety, which brings hope, which brings a bit of peace of mind versus we're stuck and we can't do anything. So some of those simple shifts are very beneficial. They don't take a lot linguistically to change, but it does take a lot in our mindset to change, because you do have to look for the good. You have to look for the reality of the situation. And so it takes practice. So it's good to think of scenarios. It's good to look at situations and pull it out and just be present in the moment and notice what's going on and see what is helpful, what isn't helpful to focus on. The other thing that we're really sensing right now is the sense of being out of control. There's so many things that are going on right now that we don't have control of, that we aren't making the decisions. We find out daily the different restrictions and different parameters that the different levels of government are putting on, and even finding out, are we essential? Aren't we essential? We can't get answers. Being out of control is a very anxious place to be. And unfortunately, there's nothing we can do when we can't do anything. When we are not in control, there's nothing we can do except to accept it. So one of the modalities I work at with is dialectical behavioral therapy. And one of the concepts they have is called radical acceptance. There is a point where we just need to say, this is the way it is, and I can manage. So in some of these situations where we don't have the information, where we don't have evidence to collect to help us have more realistic thinking, where we can just get caught up in runaway thinking because there are no answers, we need to stop, be present in the moment, and just say, you know what? It is what it is. I can't do anything about it. And then look for things that you can do that you can have control over. So I'm not saying I am the perfect human being. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I'm going to share a little bit about what I did, because I felt out of control. And now I have a very small landscaping company. And so I try to be a little bit calm in my approach, but yes, things get wound up. And I was like, what can I do when I'm not working, when I can't be out there doing what I want to be doing and getting my employees working? So one of the things I did is I looked out there and I realized there was no information about what was happening within my community when it came to the different businesses. We have restaurants, we have stores, we have service companies and things like that, all in our community. And there was spotty information around about who was doing what and who was allowed to do what and what we could do to support businesses that weren't able to operate. So I actually started a Facebook group in my community just where businesses can post, here's what we're doing today, and when things change tomorrow, here's the update. So one, as business owners, we were able to keep people informed, and as a community, we were able to see what our businesses were up to, because there is parts of that I think it's helpful when you see the feedback you get from people saying, I respect that you're not working. I get that you maybe could work, but you're choosing not to work. Or what are other companies doing? And I'm glad you've given them this platform. So finding things you can do, being altruistic, helping others is really a good place for your mental health to be if you can. When you feel out of control and you can make somebody else's life better and have control over that, it really is helpful. So what I'm going to end this section off with is just a note that these are some basic tips about how we can manage sort of our immediate anxiety. If we're not able to manage them on our own, it is important to go and seek further help before it becomes overly problematic, before it starts having you make rash decisions, before it starts negatively affecting relationships. Go and talk to somebody. So there's going to be resources that are put up when the email comes out for Ontario 211, which is a number you can call, and it just has all the social services agencies in your area. There's also a couple other tools about managing anxiety and stress that I've put up there. So this is another break if there was any questions popping up.
No questions right now.
Okay. So the other aspect, strong emotion, that I was asked to address, and I am not an expert in this field, it's grief. And grief is its own brand of counseling. There's people that are grief experts, and I am not one of them. I do know a bit about grief, and I just want to give you just a really small thumbnail about grief and how we can manage some of that. Some of you might actually wonder why I've been asked to talk about grief, because we just think often of grief as when somebody has passed away, or we've lost a pet, or when we've had a relational loss. But we grieve any loss. All losses create grief. Some is a lot of grief, some not so much grief. But loss can bring on grief. And like any emotion, like I said before, everybody grieves differently. It all looks different. People manage their grief differently, and people will grieve over different things. So somebody might lose a pet and be fine with it and be at work the next day. There are people that lose a pet and take a week off work. Again, we don't want to say it's right or wrong. Emotions are emotions. We experience them. It's hard to manage them without thinking. So a lot of the things we can do to manage loss. So when I talk about loss, we're looking at, some of us have lost income already. We've all lost a lifestyle that we're used to, where we have more freedom to walk around. And there are lots of other losses that people might be experiencing in this time. And we want to just be free to feel that emotion, be able to say, this sucks. And to be able to have other people acknowledge that this sucks is really important. So feel what you feel, express it to people. And then if it's getting you caught up, if it's causing you excess stress and really interfering with the way you function in your life, look at some of the strategies I talked about when it came to anxiety, about how are you thinking about this grief? Is this the end of the world as we know it, so to say? Or is this a lesser situation that when we look at it in a different way, it doesn't impact us as much? And again, if we're really struggling with grief and it really is something that we aren't able to manage, it is beneficial to go seek the help of somebody else and get that input. And again, the information for supports is going to be on the email after. I'm assuming there's no questions at this point, because that was really short.
No, not in there.
Okay. So we wanted to really talk about family as well, because we're all sitting together often with our family right now, and we're in close quarters, and it can be difficult to know how to manage with your family when you have all these emotions and things that you're not able to deal with. How do you support those you love and who are in your family? So we want to look at the stuff we talked about already, is getting yourself in check, making sure you're as well as you can be with your mental health and with the way you're managing your emotions. When it comes to being a parent and looking at your kids, we've, as parents, have been put in a situation that is unmanageable. It's unrealistic. I actually had little article here. It might be hard to read on your phone. It is going to be a part of the attachment, by Dr. Emily King. And it really just talks about the situation that families and parents have been put in, being put in the role of full-time parent, full-time worker if you're working from home, and full-time teacher. And it's really talking about having to pick and choose. We can't do it all. And when it comes to choosing, relationship trumps everything. We want to look at preserving relationship and making sure people are okay. The schools are coming out with a curriculum. I think it starts Monday, that there's going to be an expectation of 1 to 2 hours of work a day for kids that is actually going to be evaluated. It's not the whole day. So if we can carve out those times and make it work, but really it's about doing what we can. One of the things we can do with all these roles we're trying to do as parents, and with all the uncertainty and lack of knowledge, is to create structure. Structure is something that we all actually, you hear about people fighting structure and we don't like it, but as human beings, we like structure, we like order, and like I said, we like to know what's happening. If not, our brain just fills it in with whatever. Our kids are no different. They like structure. They might fight structure, they might balk at structure, but it creates comfort, because without structure, kids actually can become more anxious and more dysregulated. So that if we provide structure and keep them involved in the structure process, then there's going to be better outcomes for those kids. So again, I'm not the perfect person. I don't have all the answers. I'm just going to share what we've done with our kids. And to be honest, we just really implemented this yesterday. It's not overly noisy upstairs, so I'm going to say it's being successful, but we'll see how that goes. What we've done is I've printed off a blank schedule for the day. Yesterday we sat down and we had expectations as parents. There's going to be a certain amount of time that you're outside, a certain amount of time that you're doing physical activity, a certain amount of time that you're going to do schoolwork, and a certain amount of time you're going to be doing creative activities. And then the rest of the time they get on their own. They got to pick how their schedule laid out. So if they wanted to start the day with creative activities, fine. If they wanted to start it, I just wanted these things all to be accomplished in the day, but I wanted them to have the control and the sense of control to be able to plug it in where they wanted to. And so in doing that, we've created structure. They feel like they have control of something, and they're staying busy and out of our hair, ultimately, is what the goal was. Well, my wife and I are both trying to work from home and not having to answer, can I do this? Can I do that? We've just scheduled it the day before. Follow your schedule. So creating that structure, whatever works in your house is helpful. It does create more calm and is beneficial to your kids. You might notice also your kids are acting a little bit different depending on their age. Stress and anxiety can affect kids differently. Just like adults, you'll see a lot of the things that you saw on the slide before. You can see those in your kids as well. So depending on the age of your kids, you might see different things. Younger kids might be more clingy, more whiny, wanting more of your attention, more comfort. And that is actually the priority, is to comfort your kids and let them know everything's okay, not school. So I'm happy that the schools are not putting a huge demand on that when it comes to the new curriculum that's coming out on Monday. Let them know they're loved, and that, yeah, things are strange right now and you actually don't have answers, but you're going to do your best to keep everybody safe and keep us healthy. As kids get older, you're going to see different things. You might see kids that had, sort of moved on from certain behaviors. They might regress a little bit. The common one is, if say a kid's just stopped wetting the bed, they might start wetting the bed under anxious situations and stuff. That's not a problem. They shouldn't be punished. It should be, acknowledged that this must be something different, that this has changed. Again, you want to reassure them, let them know they're loved, let them know they're cared for, and that we're all going to get through this. Teenagers is my area where I do most of my work. They're a special breed and I love them. And they are different. And I could talk for a week about why teens are different than adults. But in this context, I'm just going to talk a little bit about teens, because teens, at this point, they're starting to sort of separate from parents. And so you might actually see your teens start to isolate a bit and start to rely on their own support network of peers and stuff like that. It's really important to go and check in on your teens, because we don't know the information that they're collecting from their peer supports. It might not be accurate. You also want them to know that you're still there, you still care, and that you want to hear what they have to say and you want their opinion. Children have an incredible ability to read their parents. From a young age, children can sense the emotional state of their parents. So when something is problematic and parents are just trying to deal with it and the kids aren't aware, they start to put stuff together. Like I said before, we try to complete pictures that aren't completed in our minds. So if they're getting pieces of information, they're going to develop an improper and inaccurate view. And if it's not being talked about, they're going to assume it's bad. And it must be really, really bad if we can't talk about it. An example that's been circulating on Facebook is there's this meme that says, I asked the 6-year-old why they're not in school. The 6-year-old replied, because they're out of toilet paper. This may be a real situation. It might not be. It is very realistic that a 6-year-old would think that way, because they're going to put together their own worldview. They've heard that toilet paper is running out and they're not in school. So they're going to put A and B together and assume those are the causal reasons, that the toilet paper shortage is why they're not in school. So it's best just to talk to your kids about what's going on, what you know, and what's happening in this current situation when it comes to COVID-19. Again, you want to talk to the kids in an age-appropriate manner, looking at what the developmental age is of the kid and what they require. I could do an entire webinar about human development and child perception and adolescent perception. It's not needed here. You guys know your kids, and you know what they can handle, and you know how you can relate to them. So I'm just going to give a few little tips and guidelines on how to manage the kids in having this conversation about COVID-19. The best place to start with any age kid is just to find out what they know. A younger kid, you might say, tell me what you think, why you think we're home from school. They might say, there's no toilet paper. You can say, how do you understand that you can't go play with your friends? I had to talk with my 8-year-old several times because he'll see his friend playing on their driveway as they're playing on theirs and say, can I go play with them? And it's nobody. So we had to talk about, this is something we don't know a lot about. We don't want to get them sick. We don't want to get sick from them. So as you create that conversation with them, you hear what their emotions are. You want to bring them out, and you want to correct any misinformation they might be gathering. Same with your older children, your preteens or teens. Start with what they know. You might be able to start with a more sophisticated question, like, what have you heard about COVID-19? What have you read on your social media about the coronavirus? Hear what they have to say. Ask them how they feel about that. Ask them what they think about it. You can even get opinions from older kids. Do you think the government's handling it well? What would you do different? Like, you can let them think. Important thing is to, again, let them express their emotion, and their emotions aren't wrong. You want to do what we call validate. You want to validate emotions. So if your kid comes by and says, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, I'm so scared, Dad. It's not that bad. That's totally invalidating, and that's going to not benefit the kid, even if you think whatever they're talking about isn't a big deal. And this goes for any time they have emotion. A helpful response is to go, wow, I'm really sad that you're so upset that you don't feel like you can have fun right now. Can we talk about that? Or can we do something fun? Because I would like to see you happier. Letting them know that their feelings are valid, that their feelings are good, and helping them work through that by some of the stuff we've even talked about. Talk to them about, what is the evidence that this is the end of the world? Well, everybody's not going outside. Right. People aren't getting together. People are going outside. Well, everybody's getting sick. They're not. Lots of people are getting sick, but not everybody's getting sick. Help them see the reality in the situation. The other thing that we might be running into is, how do we talk to our kids about our businesses? They're going to hear stuff. They're going to hear us talking with spouses, with partners on video chats and conferences about what's going on with COVID-19 and landscaping. Talk to them about it. Say, I don't know. You not knowing is better than them thinking you know something and them trying to figure it out. Saying you don't know is going to give them a sense that, yeah, this is a confusing time and it's okay to be confused. Tell them what you know. Yes, we're not working, so we don't have the money we used to have. So, yeah, we're not going to buy a new PlayStation right now. We're going to see how this goes before we start spending money. Those are okay conversations to have. What you want to make sure is that the kids understand that you're caring for them, that you're doing things in their best interest, and that everybody's going to make it through this in one way or another. Things might look very different at the end. You might have more money. We don't have that evidence yet, so we don't want to start talking too far ahead. We're going to be conservative and say, we're not spending money we don't need to right now, and we'll see where things are when we get to the other end and we start working again. The other group of family are those that aren't in our house. So grandparents, cousins, aunts, brothers, sisters. We want to make sure that we stay connected. Human beings are very social creatures. We thrive connection. The social isolation is difficult for human beings. There are introverts that like it, but it goes only so far. I'm extroverted, so I can't really relate. I'm a interact, touchy-feely kind of guy. So we want to stay connected, though. We've been asked to socially distance or physically distance. That's the actual terminology that mental health is trying to get out there, is physical distancing. It's not relational. It's not social. It's physical distancing that we're looking for. And so that means we can do video calls. We can do video conferences. We can do phone calls. We can write letters. We can write notes. We can drop presents off on doorsteps. Those are all things that we are allowed to do. And so stay connected to people. Stay relating to people. Stay talking to people. And we will all get through this. So to end off my presentation, I just want to, we talked sort of about the immense emotion, and I have some resources that I've put up there. There are some things we can do just to maintain, and this is on an everyday basis, even once we get through this COVID-19 thing, that we can do to just help boost our mental well-being. I mentioned before, routine is actually really helpful. My wife and I still get up at 6 to do our morning workout. We don't have to because we're working from home and we can start whenever, and we actually could start later. We just like that as a part of our routine. It's a part of what makes things feel a little bit normal. Eating healthy. We're very, it's very challenging to not eat just junk as you're sitting at home. You want to make sure you stock your house with some healthy food and make sure that we're just treating our bodies really well. Being physical and having activities. Physical activity actually does physiological things in our brain. It releases hormones and neurochemicals that make us feel better. So being physically active is really important, even though we're fairly limited in our space sometimes. Limiting, one of the main things you hear, limit what you're getting from social media, from the news. I know I have the news on probably more than I need to, and it's because things change so much. We feel we need the information, but if I didn't hear John Tory's speech because he's talking at the same time I am. Is it going to change anything when I find out an hour from now? So limit your exposure. Try to collect the information you need in sort of chunks, not slowly throughout the day. And just take care of yourself. We're going to all get through this together, and we just need to be good to ourselves. Let yourself feel what you're feeling, and try not to get caught up in the negative, and we'll all get through this. So again, thank you for this opportunity that I've had to speak to you. And if there are any questions, and as you can see there, I'm going to be talking again on Friday with more of a focus on how to manage your business and how to look at maintaining the mental health of your employees.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. We did have one question. It was an exercise question. So where does exercise fit in to maintain balance? Do you have any suggestions as to the levels and the duration that we should strive to do?
Physical activity, the sort of Canadian guideline is half an hour of more strenuous physical activity. When it comes to your kids, if they're going out, like my kids go out and play hockey in the driveway and run around the backyard and stuff like that, that's all good. Movement is good. When we become too sedentary, it actually just brings down your whole emotional well-being. So I would say just do as much as you can. If you can go for a walk once or twice a day, that's great. If you can do a cardio activity, the wonderful thing that's actually come out of this is there's so many free resources out there with online workouts. There's ones for kids and ones for adults. I know Beachbody has a whole bunch of kid workouts out there. If you look at my Facebook page, there's a link to that and a couple of things like that. But yeah, I would say as much as you can be physical. The more we just sit, because even if you think, my son, I actually had a talk with my son because I told him to go out and do something physical. He's like, well, I did yesterday. I'm like, right. But you're not chasing down the bus because you're running late. You're not playing basketball with your friends at school. You're not running around at recess, and you're not running home to play PlayStation. So you're just sitting like we all are. So some of the things that we've done when we're more free are physical activity. We've just lost those things, but those are also things we don't notice. So the more physical activity we can do, I think the better we're going to be.
Perfect. And that was actually the only question. There's a lot of thank yous on here, and people are really needing to hear this today. So we really thank you for everything, Mark.
Well, you're very welcome, and I'll be back on Friday.
Sounds great. All right. So on behalf of Landscape Ontario and our COVID-19 task force, thank you again for joining us and sharing all this wonderful information. This is a reminder that it is being recorded, so we will be sending out an email with a few of the tools later this afternoon. And a reminder that we do have the upcoming Part 2 series on managing mental health with COVID-19 in your professional life on Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock, sorry. And to stay up to date on all this information, we do have the COVID-19 resource page, which can be found at our horttrades.com website. So thank you all so much for attending, and we will see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.